Assalamu alaikum. These slides are related to the chapters 4 and 20, which are covering the basic concepts of traffic control devices. So, traffic control devices serve as a media through which the traffic engineer or the traffic authorities can communicate to the drivers. So, there are three types of traffic control devices. We have traffic markings, traffic signs, and traffic signals. There's a manual which is available for the design of these devices, which is called as Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's an exclusive manual for designing these traffic control devices. In short, it is known as MUTCD, and it was published, the last version of it was published in 2012. It's available online. It was published by FHWA, Federal Highway Administration of USA. So whenever you are designing a traffic control device, you have to keep certain points in mind. You have to fulfill basically certain criteria. So the criteria are as follows. The first one is the control device must be provided to fulfill a need. So you provide them when and where they are required. So you provide a sign which says reduce speed if reduction in speed is required. You provide a sign for directions if and where some new directions are appearing for the driver. Similarly, you provide a stop line near the intersection because this is where the driver is supposed to stop. So the traffic control device must fulfill a need and it should be provided accordingly. Secondly, it should command attention of the driver, meaning that it should be clearly visible for the driver. It should be within his line of sight. The size should be enough to attract his attention. The color should be prominent, striking, like we use red and yellow colors, so they are very striking. Even the white markings on the black asphalt are very striking, so they should be something which can attract the attention of the driver. The message which is communicated by the device should be very clear and simple. Okay, not too much text should be used. Numbers are good because everybody can understand them without the barrier of language, and there should not be too much information on one device. So you will see signboards which are used for communicating one message, and immediately after that you see another signboard which is communicating another message in the on the same location, but we don't mix them on the same signboard because then the message may get confused, the driver may get confused about the message. uh, then the fourth point is that it should command the respect of the road user. How? That the road user should be able to see the consequence of following the control device. For example, a pedestrian, you provide for him a crosswalk, so he can see where the crosswalk is provided. The median is cut from that point, so he does not have to go up and down, and it is after the signal, so vehicles are stopped there, so he can see that using the crosswalk is more beneficial for him than crossing from somewhere else. So these things basically command the respect of the road user, encourage them to follow the traffic control devices. Then you should be giving proper time for the response to the drivers. For example, you are putting a signal, the signal may require the driver to stop or even a stop sign. Then in that case the device, the sign or signal should be visible to the driver from such a point that he can stop safely when he reaches the stop line. For example, he requires 400 feet to stop, then the point from which he can see the sign or the signal should be 400 feet from the stop line. So then when he reaches the stop line, he can stop safely. So this is what we mean by the last point, giving adequate time for proper response to the drivers. There are certain key points which we use for fulfilling the above mentioned criteria. First of all, when you are communicating communicate in a clear and standard way. So we have discussed about the clarity. The font should be clear, minimum text, use symbols and numbers which everyone can understand. It should be according to a standard. So a symbol is used for no parking. That has a standard. That is a standard symbol. You can see a sign for stop here. Again, that's a standard sign with standard size and color. And it should be used with redundancy. Redundancy means you communicate something in more than one way. Redundancy in general means to do something extra, more than required. And in terms of communicating, it means that you communicate something with more than one way. So for example, when somebody is talking, he is using his hand and he is using his facial expression. That is redundancy. Even the people who are not paying attention can see that what he is talking about. Similarly, in case of traffic control devices, redundancy is given by the color and shape and pattern and the symbols which are used on the sign. For example, important signs are usually red in color, and if they are warning signs, then you will see them, they are in triangular shape. So the shape and the color is communicating the same message to the driver that the sign is important, and most of the times they will ask him to stop. So red is basically for stopping. Okay, similarly, uh, the shape of the sign, okay, it's a circular shape, and the type of legend you are using, the type of symbol you are using. So usually if you are prohibiting something, then it is usually given with a diagonal line or a cross. Okay, so the legend crossing line on the symbol means that it is prohibiting you to do something. So this is what we mean by communicating the message driver in more than one way, communicating the message redundantly. So you can see the example of the stop sign here. The shape is circular. Okay, so circular shaped signs are usually communicating a law to you, and the red color is basically communicating that it may be related to stopping of the vehicle, and then the word itself given in two languages is communicating the same message to stop. uh, there are different types of traffic control devices. The first one we will discuss is traffic markings. So markings are the things usually which you see on the pavement, and they are the most commonly used traffic control devices. Sometimes they are used throughout the highway. Markings can be of three types. You can have longitudinal markings, transverse markings, and object markers. Longitudinal markings are provided along the length of the road, like these. Okay, so they involve markings for lanes, markings for stop lines, shoulders, pavement edge, okay, warning areas, arrow markings. Okay, then transverse markings are those which are given along the cross section of the road. So they basically include stop lines, crosswalks, and these yellow boxes which we use, and give way signs and so on. And sometimes for parking as well, the marking which you give for parking spaces are also included in transverse markings. Then we have object markers. Object markers are can be on the pavement or they can be above the pavement as well. Object markers are basically used as a warning sign for the driver for an object which is coming in their way. So he's traveling on a lane, and because of some reason that lane is no longer continued. Maybe you are providing a traffic island, maybe you are providing a diversion towards another road. Okay, so at that point, just providing a marking may not be enough, the driver may not be paying attention to it. So we provide something above the ground so that it can get more attention of the driver. So you can see there are some pictures given for the object markers, okay, which I have taken from Bahrain. So this one is for a traffic island, okay, which is near the intersection. So these lanes are for left turning, and to separate the left turning lane from the straight lanes, they have provided this traffic island, and it is provided with an object marker. Similarly, these are the markers which we provide before the traffic islands or before the ramps. Okay, and we call them delineators. Okay, and sometimes you see these cone shaped markers and delineators as well near the construction sites. Okay, so all of them are basically providing you warning that you can no longer continue on this in this lane. Then we will talk about traffic signs. Traffic signs are also again of different types. The first one of them is a regulatory sign. So a regulatory sign is basically conveying some regulation, some traffic law to the drivers. So it is related to safety of the drivers because laws are made to ensure the safety of the drivers, and it is also related to having an orderly and smooth flow of traffic as well. Some laws are in place so that traffic flow is not blocked. So regulatory signs are related to safety and smooth flow of traffic, but you have to follow them. You cannot choose which signs to follow, which signs to not follow. If it's a regulatory sign, you have to follow. Otherwise, you will be penalized if you are caught. So, for example, the speed limit sign which you see here, it's a regulatory sign. You have to follow the speed limit. You have to be at or below the sign. Others can be signs about the usage of the lane, which lane is for going right and left, sign for parking, parking allowed or not allowed, and other things. Then we have warning signs. Warning signs are used for providing a warning to a potential danger to the driver, something which may cause an accident to him. So it is directly related to his safety. So we want to attract his attention to a danger which is coming in his way. We use a warning sign. For example, this one, you see it is communicating that there is a reverse curve ahead, so he should be driving slowly so that he can move over the curve safely. Then we have guide signs. They are provided for guiding the drivers to proper routes and destinations. Like you give signs which road goes to which area, which direction will take you to which area, and maybe some nearby facilities that the drivers may be interested in, petrol pumps and hotels, clinics, banks, ATMs. So they are indicated with the guidance signs. For example, this one, it is providing you the guide towards the routes to different areas. And then the last one of traffic control devices is traffic signal. So we know about traffic signals. What are they? So when you install the traffic signal, the signal cannot be turned off. It must remain operational throughout its life cycle. Okay, unless you completely demolish the intersection, then obviously then you will remove the signal as well, but otherwise the signal should remain operational at all times. And you cannot use a stop sign with a signal, but you can use a signal in a flashing red phase. Okay, so you can, if you want to convert the signal to a stop sign, you cannot remove it, you will not remove it, or you will not put a stop sign with the signal. You can make the signal program with the flashing red light, so it will continuously flash red, and flashing red basically means it's for stopping, stop sign. What are the benefits of using a signal? Now you must understand, we discussed it in highway as well, the signals increase the delay normally as compared to other types of devices. Stop signs and roundabout signals have more delay. Then why do we use them? Signals are used because it can handle more volume, so it can increase the capacity of the intersection, especially for movements which are higher in volume, so it can handle more volume as compared to other types of intersections. It can decrease the frequency of severe accidents. For example, accidents which are made at right angle. Okay, so one vehicle is entering the intersection like this, the other one enters from this direction, there will be a severe accident. So signal blocks these types of accidents because these two movements will not be allowed at the same time. Okay, turnings, the dangerous turnings, left turn accidents, they are blocked by the signal because they are happening in different times. Pedestrian accidents are blocked, many of them, because pedestrians can choose when they want to cross the intersection during the red time. So the frequency and severity of accidents is reduced on the signal. There are some less severe accidents which may increase, like rear end accident. So a vehicle going like this, somebody, and this vehicle sees a red signal, and it tries to stop, and it may get hit by this vehicle coming from the rear. But these accidents are less severe, so even if they increase, it is not a big issue. Signals can provide for continuous movement through the arterial. Okay, so you have, for example, this arterial. Okay, and this arterial is going through a series of signals. Okay, so you can make sure a vehicle, when it goes from here on green signal, when this vehicle reaches at this point, this signal also becomes green. So this vehicle doesn't have to stop on all the signals, it can keep on moving. But obviously this can be done only for the arterial. You cannot maintain the same thing for the minor crossing street. uh, Sometimes we need to balance the timing of the signal for the heavy movement as well as for the minor movement, because sometimes if you have a roundabout or if you have a stop sign, because of the heavy movement on the major road, the drivers on the minor road do not have a chance at all to enter the intersection. I'm talking about these drivers. So if there is no signal here on this highway, and the drivers keep on moving because there is so much traffic on this highway, these drivers may not have any chance at all to move. So in that case, a signal provides them equal, not equal because they don't need equal chance, but it provides them the required time which they need to cross. Okay, so signal provide a balance for the minor and the major movements as well, and also for the pedestrians. Obviously, when you have heavy movement in one direction, then there is no chance for the pedestrians to cross as well. So signals provide a balance at the intersection for the minor movements as well as for the pedestrian crossings. There are some terms which we need to understand when we are dealing with the signals. First of all, the lights of the signals are called as balls. Okay, so a ball means one particular light of the signal. Why we call them ball? Because they, if you see them, they are circular in shape. So we call them balls. So we have a green ball, yellow ball, and red ball. Green ball means you can go ahead in whatever direction is allowed. Yellow ball means you can proceed slowly, with caution, with care, and most of the times you should be ready to stop. Okay, yellow is more critical when it is provided before the red signal. After the red, if it is provided, if you are providing yellow between red and green, that is not so critical. Yellow between green and red is more critical. So that yellow basically means proceed with caution and prepare to stop. Then we have red ball, which means basically so stop. Then we have flashing ball. Flashing ball means a continuously flashing light. So we usually have flashing yellow and flashing red. Okay, nowadays we are using flashing green as well, but flashing green basically means same as a yellow. Okay, that signal is about to turn yellow and red, so you proceed with caution and be ready to stop. Flashing yellow means it's a give way or yield sign, so you have to follow it like you follow a give way sign. You proceed with caution, and if there's another vehicle coming from the other side, you have to give way to them. And then we have a flashing red, which basically means it's like a stop sign. So you come to the signal and you stop, and you will move ahead when there's nobody coming from the other side. Then sometimes signals are provided with arrow indications as well. So you have a signal ball, and within the signal ball you can see an arrow like this, or sometimes it's an arrow for left turning. So that means that signal is only for reserved for that movement. So you see a signal which has green, which is green, and it is given with a straight arrow. That means when this is green, only straight movement is allowed. Other movements will have to wait for their turn. So arrow indications with the signal basically show which movements are controlled by this particular signal. Then we have discussed earlier about the sight distance. We have talked about it earlier as well. It is one of the criteria to give enough time for the drivers to do a proper response. So that distance which the driver will need for the response depends upon his speed. So in this table you can see the sight distance is given according to the 85th percentile speed, which is the upper limit for speed for 85% of the drivers. And you can do a free flow speed survey on the highway and you can find out the 85th percentile speed of the drivers. Then there are different components of the signal. The first thing which you must understand is a cycle. We have discussed a cycle in other chapters as well. So a cycle means the complete rotation of the indication of the signal. Okay, cycle is basically when the signal completes all its indications, including all movements. So it completes one cycle then. And how do you know one cycle is completed? When one side received green, that cycle is started, and when that side receives the green again, that's the end of the cycle, because when that side receives green, all the other directions have completed their movement as well. And then we have the concept of cycle length, which is the time taken to complete the cycle. Then we have interval, which is the time during which signal indications do not change. Okay, so if the signal was green, it will remain green in the complete cycle, sorry, in one complete interval. So that is an interval. So when the signal becomes green, that is the start of interval, and when it becomes yellow, it's the end of one interval and it's the start of the new interval. Okay, so in that time when the signal was green, its indication was not changing, right? So it is an interval. Then we have different types of intervals. We have green interval when the signal is green. We have change interval when the signal is yellow. And then we have clearance interval when the signal is we have clearance interval when the signal is all red. It is showing red in all directions. So we call it clearance interval. Why do we give clearance interval? Sometimes the vehicle has crossed the intersection, the stop line. It is in the middle of the intersection, so it crossed during yellow, and it did not know that when it crossed, the signal became red behind the driver. So if the other movement starts immediately, then the vehicle will enter and hit this vehicle which is in the intersection. So we give a clearance interval for the vehicles which are already in the intersection to pass before any other movement is started. Then we have green interval, red interval, and then we have a phase. Phase is the combination of intervals, green plus change plus clearance, which is given for one movement. Okay, a phase is a complete movement time given for one particular side or one particular direction. Okay, so you can move during green, you can move during yellow, which is change interval, and if you are in the intersection, you can move during clearance or all red time as well. So these three things are the total movement time assigned to a particular site. So that becomes a phase for that site, for that side of the signal. Now signals can be operated in different ways. So there are three different ways mentioned here for operating a signal. One of them is pre-timed operation. That means the timing of the signal, its cycle length and phases are all constant. They are pre-programmed. Okay, and they will not change according to any change in the traffic of that time. So normally there is an internal clock or an internal processor, or you can say internal memory in these signals, pre-timed signals, and in that memory you feed in the signal timing plans for different timings of the day. For example, the timing plan which you will have in the morning, may not work in the evening. It may not work 12 o'clock at night because that's the off peak hour. So normally we develop like at least 3 different timing plans for 3 different times of the day, and we program it in the signal, and it will not change unless you change it manually. Then we have semi-actuated operation where you have a minor road crossing a major road, and sensors or detectors are put on the minor road so that the major road will have a continuous green signal unless there is a car from the minor road and that car actuates or activates the signal to become red for the major road. Unless that happens, the signal on the major road will remain green. Then we have fully actuated operation of the signal, which is done when you have two major roads crossing each other. So you will put sensors on all directions, in all directions of the signal, and the green time is allocated according to the traffic demand and the rules which you will put in the signal. So these signals, although they can change many things, like the cycle length can change, the sequence of phases can change, the green time for each direction can change, and it can change from one cycle to another cycle as well. So maybe now you have a cycle length of 120 seconds, next cycle length can be of 150 seconds as well. So all these things can change, but we provide some rules to the programmer as well. The programmer which is doing these things within the signal will provide some rules for that programmer. For example, the maximum cycle length and the minimum cycle length. Obviously cycle length cannot be 0, and similarly cycle length cannot be 1 hour as well. Okay, so these rules are inserted, and the signals can make changes within the timing according to the within the rules which you have provided. Another way of operating the signal is in a coordinated manner. So coordinated signal means that one signal is connected with the other signal. Okay, so the green time of one signal is connected with the green time of the next one and the next one. This is what we call as signal coordination. It is usually applied when the signals are very close to each other. Okay, and I found the limit to be within 800 meters. Okay, so if we have two signals which are very close to each other, 800 meters or less distance between them, then you do signal coordination for them, because handling them as single intersections will not be that effective, because a vehicle will leave from one signal, and before it can accelerate or do anything, it is at the other signal. So in that case, we handle the signals in a coordinated manner, because one signal is significantly affecting the other one. The main idea of having a coordinated signal is that the vehicles do not have to stop at these nearby signals, so they can keep on moving. Like I told you at the start, for the benefits of the signal, one of the benefits is this: the signals are too close to each other. You can program them in such a way that once a vehicle stops at one signal, that vehicle does not have to stop at the immediate nearby signal. And you do this by controlling the time of the two signals, and uh, by handling the offsets. Now what is an offset? Offset is the time difference between two adjacent signals. Time difference between the green indication, basically between two adjacent signals. So when one signal becomes green, after how many seconds the next signal will become green, that will become its offset. Okay, so one signal becomes green, and then the next one becomes green after 20 seconds. So 20 seconds is the offset between them. Okay, and this offset is calculated from the time vehicle takes to go from one signal to the next one. Okay, so when the vehicle crosses the first signal, it takes 20 seconds to reach the next one. Then after 20 seconds, the next one will become green, so that vehicle will continue without stopping. There is a restriction when you are applying coordinated signals, that is that cycle lengths for these signals cannot change. They operate on constant cycle lengths, and these cycle lengths are common. So all the signals are having the same cycle length, and it cannot change. Okay, because if it keeps on changing, then the offset will keep on changing, and there will be there will be many complexities in the design and the programming of the signal. So that's why we keep the cycle length as constant. It will not change from one signal to the other. If you want to see an example of that in Bahrain, then you can see it on 16 December highway and Hassan highway. Okay, so the main highway is coordinated. Okay, another thing about coordination is you coordinate signals for the movement which is happening on the main highway, on the main arterial. The connected streets will not have coordination. Okay, then we have the concept of saturation headway and saturation flow rate. Saturation headway is the average headway which you can achieve for a smooth and stable flow of traffic on the intersection. Okay, so headway we have discussed earlier is a time difference between two vehicles. So the average time difference which you will get between two consecutive vehicles when they are moving consistently in a stable and a smooth manner, that is the saturation headway. And obviously that cannot happen if the signal is, just about to become green, or it has just become no, sorry, if the signal has is just about to become red, because then the vehicles will be slowing down, then the flow will not be stable, it will not be consistent. And the same thing will happen when the signal has just become green. Then again the vehicles are accelerating, they are not going at a constant speed. So again the headway which you will see at that point is also cannot also be saturation headway. So it's something between them. Okay, it's way before the signal has become red, and it's way after the signal has become green. Okay, so at that time, right in the middle of the green time, you will achieve a saturation headway, because then the vehicles are moving at a in a consistent manner with a stable flow. And the flow rate which you will achieve when the vehicles are moving at saturation headway, we call it saturation flow rate. Okay, saturation flow rate, and it is represented with a small letter s. Okay, so what is saturation flow rate? The flow rate which you will achieve when the vehicles are moving at saturation headway. And obviously flow rate is in vehicles per hour. Okay, so uh, it's a theoretical value because you cannot have vehicles moving at saturation headway for 1 hour. Okay, so saturation flow rate is a theoretical value which you may achieve, obviously, in theory which you can achieve saturation flow rate if the signal remains green for 1 hour, and obviously it is not possible. Okay, so whatever hours, whatever seconds of green you have, the flow rate which you will achieve in that much time is a saturation flow rate, and it can be calculated as the inverse of saturation headway, where 3600 is the conversion rate from seconds to hours, because headway is in seconds and we need the flow rate to be in vehicles per hour. Okay, that gives us the concept of startup loss time. So when the signal becomes green, the first vehicle and the second vehicle, since they have started to accelerate, so the headway between them will be higher as compared to the headway between the second and the third vehicle. So this vehicle has just started to move, and this vehicle is moving after that, so there will be more time difference between them because they are just trying to accelerate now. So there will be more time difference between them as compared to these two vehicles, the second and the third vehicle. They will achieve more acceleration when they cross the stop line. Now, by the way, we are measuring the headway uh, from the reference of the stop line. So I am standing here at this line, or I am observing this line and measuring the headway between the two vehicles. So the time difference between the first and second vehicle to cross the stop line will be higher as compared to the time difference between second and third vehicle. Okay, why? Because of the loss of acceleration between the first and second vehicle. Second and third vehicle will be close to each other in terms of their acceleration, and third and fourth will be more closer to each other. So as they are reaching their desired acceleration rate or their desired speed, when they cross the stop line, their headway will start to become lesser and lesser until it will reach to a constant value, and that value is what we call as the saturation headway earlier. Okay, we represent it with h. So that constant value which you will achieve after the initial few vehicles from the queue have passed is known as saturation headway. Okay, so in the graph, if you want to see it, so on the y-axis you have headway, and on the x-axis you have the number of vehicles which are passing from the stop line. So for the first vehicle, for the first pair of vehicle, it is very high, then it keeps on getting lower and lower and lower, but obviously it cannot reach zero because zero headway means an accident. So it will reach a consistent value, and that value is basically the saturation headway. Okay, now let's say the difference between the saturation headway, which is this value, the constant value which will achieve, and the first few vehicles, the difference between the saturation headway and the headway of the first few vehicles. Let us call that difference as delta. Okay, so you will achieve a very high delta for the first pair of vehicle, then the delta will keep on getting smaller and smaller as we move along, and up to the third or the fourth vehicle in the queue. Okay, so usually you will have some delta for the first 3 or 4 vehicles in the queue. After the first 3 or 4 vehicles in the queue, you will reach a headway of saturation, and then delta will become zero. There will be no difference between the saturation headway and the actual headways of the vehicle. So if you combine all the delta values for the queue, you will get what we call as a startup loss time. Okay, so what is startup loss time? Startup loss time is the difference in headway of the vehicles in the queue and the saturation headway, and usually it will happen in the first 3-4 vehicles. For the last, after the first 3-4 vehicles, delta will become zero, so you will not have any startup loss time. So whenever signal becomes green, the first 3-4 vehicles consume some extra headway that is lost to the signal, to the changing of the uh, indication of the signal. Okay, and it will happen every time the signal becomes green. So the total loss time for any phase of the signal is calculated by adding two quantities, L1 and L2, where L1 is the startup loss time, we already discussed it, okay, the extra headway, and L2 is the clearance loss time. And remember, I told you this is the all red time. Okay, the time when all the signals are red, showing red. It is given for the clearance of the intersection by the vehicles which are already in the intersection. Okay, so obviously this time in terms of signal it is lost. No movement is allowed by the signal, so it is lost. So this happens every time the signal becomes red, right? So you have the start of the phase. When the signal becomes green, you will have some startup loss time, and at the end of the phase when the signal becomes red, you will have the clearance loss time. So with each phase of the signal you have these two loss times. So if you want to calculate effective green time, that will be calculated using this equation. Now what do we mean by effective green time? Effective green time means the time during which the vehicles are moving at a saturation headway. So I told you, when the signal becomes green, the vehicles are not moving at saturation headway, and similarly when the signal is ending, again the vehicles are not moving at saturation headway. So the time in which they are actually moving at saturation headway is the effective green time. Okay, and the remaining time of that phase will be called as a effective red time. So we have an effective green time and we have an effective red time. So you can calculate effective green time using this equation, and you can calculate the effective red time by subtracting green time from the total phase time. Okay, how do you calculate effective green time? We have the actual green. So capital G is actual green when the signal is actually showing green light, and small g is the effective green. So actual green plus capital Y. Now capital Y has two timings, has two intervals. It has a yellow interval and it has an all red interval. So change and clearance interval both are included here. Okay, change and all red interval both are included here, capital Y. So again capital Y is change plus all red, and small y is just the yellow interval. Okay, so capital Y is a combination of yellow and all red, and small y is just the yellow time. So we have actual green plus yellow plus all red. Okay, because you can move during green, you can move during yellow, and you can also move during all red if you are in the intersection. But from this time there is a time in which the vehicles are not moving at saturation headway. So you have to subtract those lost times. So those lost times are L1 and L2, which we combine in TL. Okay, so TL is the total lost time for phase I. So one signal will have multiple phases for multiple directions. So for each phase, you can calculate the effective green time using this equation. Let us look at one example here. This is related to calculating capacity of a direction of the signal. So let's say for a particular direction on a signalized intersection or for a particular movement, this data is provided. Total cycle length is 60 seconds. Out of that, signal shows green time for 27 seconds. Then after green time, it has yellow and all red both. Again, this is capital Y. So yellow and all red both are 4 seconds. Saturation headway is 2.4 seconds per vehicle. We have a startup loss time of 2 seconds and clearance loss time of 2 seconds as well. Okay, so we have to calculate the capacity per lane for the movement which has these green and yellow and all red times. Okay, so we can calculate capacity using two approaches. In the first approach, we will be using the total effective green time. In the second approach, we will be using the concept of saturation headway or saturation flow rate. Okay, so in the first approach, we have one cycle which consists of 60 seconds. Okay, so if one cycle is 60 seconds, then in 1 hour you can have 60 cycles, right? Okay, because in 1 hour you have 3600 seconds and each cycle is 60 seconds. So 3600 upon 60 will give you 60 cycles in 1 hour. Okay, and in each cycle, how much effective green time I have? For effective green time, I have the equation which is actual green plus yellow and all red and minus the total loss time. Okay, so actual green is 27 seconds plus 4 seconds which is for yellow and all red. Okay, minus 4 which is for total loss time. Okay, how do I get total loss time? You add startup loss time and clearance loss time, so you get total loss time, so minus 4. Okay, so this is the effective green in one cycle, and then you multiply by 60 cycles because 1 hour has 60 cycles. So in 1 hour you have effective green time of 1620 seconds. Okay, this much green effective green in one cycle, and multiply by the number of cycles in 1 hour, you get total effective green in 1 hour. Okay, and we said during effective green time the vehicles are moving at saturation headway. Okay, the interval between the vehicles is equal to saturation headway. So I have the total time and I have the time taken by each vehicle. So total time divided by time taken by each vehicle, you get number of vehicles. So in 1 hour this movement can pass 675 vehicles per hour per lane. Now in the second approach, I will use the concept of saturation flow rate. So I said saturation flow rate is the flow rate which you will achieve when vehicles are moving at saturation headway, right? So in 1 hour I have 3600 seconds. I divide it by the saturation headway, I get number of vehicles which can pass in 1 hour, and this is saturation headway, right? We said saturation headway is the inverse of saturation flow rate converted to hours, so this is what I did. Now saturation flow rate, as I told you earlier, is the theoretical value which may happen if you have the whole cycle as effective green. If vehicles keep on moving throughout the hour at saturation headway, and when they are moving at saturation headway, we call that time as effective green time, right? So if the whole cycle was effective green, then you can achieve saturation flow rate. But obviously we don't have the whole cycle as effective green. How much of the cycle is effective green? This much, 27 seconds. So out of 60 seconds of cycle length, only 27 seconds are effective green. So out of the 1500 which I could have achieved if the whole cycle was effective green, how much can I actually achieve? 1500 into the proportion of cycle length which is effective green. Okay, so 1500 into the proportion of effective green time for the cycle length, and you get the same answer which you got from the first approach. Okay, 675 vehicles per hour per lane. So this movement with effective green time of 27 seconds in a 60-second cycle length can have 675 vehicles per hour passing from one lane. Okay, now we said lost time in one phase is represented with TL. Now if number of phases in one cycle are n, then n into TL will give you lost time in the whole cycle. Okay, and let us represent it with capital L. So capital L is the total lost time in one cycle, which you will get by multiplying the number of phases in one cycle with the time lost in each phase. Then the lost time in 1 hour will be lost time in one cycle multiplied by the number of cycles you have in 1 hour. Okay, so 3600 is the time of 1 hour divided by C, which is the time for one cycle. So this will give you number of cycles, and you multiply with the time lost per cycle, you get time lost in 1 hour. Okay, now if you want to have effective green time in 1 hour, so total lost time of the hour minus the total time of the hour 3600 minus the total lost time of the hour, which is L into LH. I just calculated it. So this will give you total effective green time in 1 hour. And if you want to calculate how many vehicles can pass in effective green time, then you will do effective green time upon saturation headway, like we did in the previous example. Okay, so TG is the total green time available for the vehicles to pass, and H is the interval by which they are passing. So TG upon H will give you the number of vehicles which can pass for the signal. Okay, so TG by H will give you the volume which can pass from the signal from all directions. So in this equation, the last one which I got, this one, okay, I can expand this equation by putting the values of TG, and then in the equation for TG I have the value for LH as well, so I can put the value of LH from here, and then in the equation of LH I have L, and I can put the value of L from here. Okay, so you expand the equation for VC, the volume, the critical volume, as they are saying, the maximum critical lane volume on your intersection can be calculated using this equation. How did I get this equation? I took the equation for VC, which I showed in the previous slide, and that equation I put the value of our TG and then LH and then L. So you will get this final equation. Okay, where H is the saturation headway, N is the number of phases you have in one cycle, TL is the lost time in one cycle, and capital C is the cycle length which you have. Now if you look at the equation, if I increase the number of phases in this equation, okay, VC will decrease because you see N is subtracted here. So if you increase the number of phases, if you increase N, VC will decrease. Similarly, if I increase C here, so C is dividing the negative quantity. So if I increase C, VC will increase. Okay, you can see they have done this exercise and they have plotted the values in this graph for me. So I have VC on the y-axis and I have cycle length on the x-axis, and then you see different curves which are given for different number of phases. So you can see that when the number of phases are increasing, VC is decreasing, and when the cycle length increases, VC is also increasing. So how this is coming? This is coming from this equation. Now the minimum number of phases you can have is 2, because less than 2 means that you have one phase, that means all movements are happening at the same time, which is not possible. It will have accidents. So minimum number of phases you can have is 2, but there is a maximum for the cycle length as well. You cannot just keep on increasing the cycle length. Okay, because if you keep on increasing the cycle length, that means you are also increasing the time between one phase and the other phase as well. So when my phase is red, it may remain red for, let's say, 3 minutes or 4 minutes, which is a very long time. Okay, in that time the queue will the queue will block the whole segment. Okay, so that's why we keep cycle length up to a reasonable limit, usually uh, like up to 5 minutes. I have you can see it in the intersection in Bahrain as well. Cycle length up to 5 minutes, which is 300 seconds. So up till that much is still acceptable, but if you try to keep it below, it's better. Okay, so cycle length, although it can increase the capacity, the volume which can pass through the intersection, but if you keep on increasing it, it will cause a delay to the other drivers which are waiting for their chance when they wait from one phase to the next phase. So this is what I was saying earlier. Okay, another thing is when you are trying to calculate the cycle length, okay, or when you are trying to calculate the volume which can pass through a signal, you do not want your signal to operate at capacity at any time, right? The best case for you would be that your signal is operating below capacity. Okay, because there may be some emergencies, some extra vehicles may come, so you don't want this thing to result into a traffic jam because of few extra vehicles, or there may be some error in your calculations for volume and cycle length, so you want to have some margin of error for you, right? So we want the signal to be operating at below capacity even in the peak hour. One thing. Secondly, whenever we calculate capacity, it is always calculated in terms of maximum flow rate, not maximum volume. So VC was volume, not flow rate. So we don't want volume, we don't want to calculate volume, we want to calculate flow rate, because we discussed it in the volume studies chapter as well, that uh, if your segment has high capacity but you did not take into account the fluctuation which you have between 15 minutes period or 5 minutes period, then eventually, because of very high flow in one particular time period, the whole hour may see traffic jam. Okay, so we always calculate capacity in terms of maximum flow rate, so that even if there is a very high flow within any particular period of the hour, your signal will still pass your signal or your segment can still work according to its own capacity. It will not have any traffic jam. So there are two things which I need to do with the previous equation which I showed you. First of all, I need to convert V into flow rate. It is volume now. I need to convert to flow rate. So in order to convert to flow rate, you divide by PHF, peak hour factor. Okay. So V divided by peak hour factor will convert the volume to flow rate. And then I also divided with V by C ratio. What is V by C ratio? V means the current volume of the highway and C means the capacity of the highway. Okay, so ideally we want the V by C ratio to be less than 1. Okay, so if you don't divide by V by C ratio, that means you are taking it as 1, meaning volume is equal to capacity, which I told you is not a good case. You don't want the volume to be equal to capacity, because then there is no margin of error and there is no flexibility in your traffic flow. So I want the V by C ratio to be less than 1. So you put V by C ratio of less than 1 into this equation and divide with VC. So your actual capacity will be higher than the volume which you are taking here. Okay. So your capacity will come out to be higher than the volume if you take V by C ratio less than 1 and put it in this equation. So I took the equation of VC on the previous slide and then I rearranged it to give me the value of cycle length. Okay, there was cycle length in that equation, so I put it here. So if you are just using that equation to calculate cycle length without using peak hour factor and without using V by C ratio, it will give you the minimum cycle length. Okay, it is also acceptable, but it's not a good choice. Good choice is when you, instead of putting volume, you put flow rate, so divide by peak hour factor, and instead of having volume equal to capacity and put it as assuming V by C as 1, you put a V by C ratio of less than 1 and C and calculate the cycle length. So this will give you the desirable cycle length now. Okay, desirable means is preferable. Okay, the one which you want to have, and one which has more chances of operating below capacity and having no traffic jam. Now V by C ratio is normally taken in this range, zero point 0.8 to 0.95, and obviously if you keep on getting closer to 1, that means you are decreasing your margin of error or flexibility. Now let us look at this example. We have a 3-phase signal, and total loss time each phase is 4 seconds. The saturation headway is 2.2 seconds per vehicle, and peak hour factor is 0.9. We are expecting a volume of 1200 vehicles per hour to pass through this intersection, and we have to find out the desirable cycle length so that V by C is maintained from 0.8 to 1. So we have to try different values of V by C starting from 0.8 and going up to 1. Okay, so we start from V by C ratio is 1. So the equation for desirable cycle length is this one. Okay, in this equation 3 is a number of phases, okay, which we said as n, and TL is a loss time per phase, then VC is the volume we are expecting, 2.2 is the saturation headway, then we have the peak hour factor here, 0.9, and then 1 is the V by C ratio. Okay, so you put all these values here. So we have started by testing V by C ratio of 1. So the cycle length which we are getting here is almost 65 seconds. It's 64.8, but you will take it as 65 seconds. Then you try 0.95 in the same way. So all the other things are constant, only this value is changing. Then you try 0.9, then you try 0.85, then you try 0.8. Okay, now you see when V by C ratio is decreasing, the cycle length is increasing. Okay, why? Because a lower V by C ratio means more flexibility in your design. There is more difference between your capacity and your volume. Okay, that's how the V by C ratio is decreasing, right? Because the difference between the volume and capacity is increasing. So when you are having more higher capacity than volume, when you are increasing the difference between your capacity, you want it to be much higher than volume, then you have to give more cycle length as well. Okay, and then in the end you see a negative value for cycle length as well. Now this negative value indicates that in this combination of data, with this combination of data, a V by C ratio of 0.8 cannot give you any possible answer. There is no possible cycle length for V by C ratio of 0.8. Okay, so a negative value means now this is the end of your calculation. You have to try something new now. So we have another example here. In this example we are given with the intersection, and the volume coming from each direction is also given here. Okay, so we have 1800 in this direction and 1200 in this direction. The initial design of the signal is given with cycle length and loss time and number of phases. Peak hour factor is given, V by C ratio is given, saturation headway is given. Our task is to use this initial design to find out the number of lanes in each direction, and then if possible calculate the desirable cycle length as well. Okay, so although they have initial design, but they want to update it once we find out the number of lanes. So this initial design is just to find out how many lanes we should provide in each direction. Okay, so first of all we can use the equation for VC because we have the initial design of the signal. So you can use the equation for VC to find out how much volume we can have with this design of the signal. If the design is like this, cycle length and everything is like this, then how much volume I can have on this signal. So this is the equation for VC. We earlier derived it. So I know the value of saturation headway 2.3 seconds. Number of phases are 2, so 2 here. Loss time per phase is 4, so 4 here. And the cycle length initial is given as 60 seconds, so 60. Okay, so with this designer signal, total volume which you can pass from this intersection is 1357 vehicles per hour. Total volume from all directions can be 1357 vehicles per hour. Now let's say in each in this direction you have 1800, and in this direction, in the other direction, you have 1200. So total 18 plus 1200 gives you 3000. Okay, so total volume in current condition is 3000 vehicles per hour, assuming that I have one lane in each direction, because one lane means all 1800 vehicles will move from one lane and all 1200 vehicles will move in this direction from one lane. Okay, so with one lane in each direction, the total volume will be 3000, which is, you know, very much very high than my capacity. Okay, now let's see what happens if I increase the number of lanes. So let's say I increase the number of lanes one by one in each direction at a time. So up till now I have 1200 here and 1800 here. So this direction has more volume. Okay, so I'm increasing 2 lanes here. I'm making it 2 lanes so that higher volume is divided into 2 lanes. So if you divide 1800 into 2 lanes, you will have 900 in each lane approximately. Okay, it's not always the case that the volume is divided equally, but we will talk about it later on. For the time being, we are assuming that volume is divided equally. So 1800 divided by 2 will give you 900 from each lane. Okay, so now from this direction at a time I have to pass only 900 vehicles, right? If 900 can pass from one lane, 900 can pass simultaneously from the other lane as well. So I don't have to consider 1800, I just have to consider 900 which is passing from one lane. So 900 from one lane and 1200 from this direction. I have not made any other lanes here, so this remains 1200. So 1200 plus 900 gives you 2100. This is still higher than the capacity which I have calculated. Okay, so let us increase the number of lanes now in the other direction, because this direction has less volume per lane as compared to this direction. Okay, so instead of having one lane, I will have 2 lanes. So dividing 1200 by 2 will give me 600 each lane, and I have 900 each lane here. So 600 plus 900 gives you 1500, which is still more than what I have calculated. Okay, so now I will see which direction has more volume per lane. So I see this direction has more volume per lane, so I increase one more lane here. So it will be, total was 1800, so 1800 by 3 now becomes 600 each lane. So I have 600 in each lane in both directions. So 600 plus 600 is 1200. Okay, so I have 1200 which is below my capacity. Okay, so I can stop here. So providing 3 lanes in the east-west direction, okay, and 2 lanes in the north-south direction is the optimum design for this case, in which I can achieve the capacity with the initial design of the signal. Okay, now using this value of VC, use this value of VC, which is now VC is 1200. Okay, with 2 lanes and 3 lanes, VC is now 1200. So now you go to the equation for desirable cycle length and put VC as 1200 and see how much should be the actual cycle length. And now you will be using the peak hour factor, which is 0.95, as well as the V by C ratio as well, which is 0.9. So using these values, you get 77.7 seconds of cycle length. Okay, so if I round it up, it will give me 80 seconds. Okay, usually cycle lengths are rounded up to the nearest 10th or the 5th second. So I will have 80 seconds of cycle length in this case. Okay, so what I did here was I found how many lanes should I provide using the initial design of the signal, and then once I have found the number of lanes, and I recalculated the cycle length as a desirable cycle length, including the peak hour factor and the V by C ratio. Okay, this is why this is desirable, and this is why the initial is not good, because it does not cater for the peak hour factor, meaning the flow rate, and the V by C ratio, meaning to have volume less than capacity in the peak hour. So now they have given me a restriction in my case, that they are saying that you cannot have more than 2 lanes in each direction because the space is limited. So in that case I had 1200 here. Okay, so 1200 with 2 lanes. Okay, so you divide by 2, it will become 600. Okay, and then you take this direction, it was 1800, and you divide by 2 because again I will have 2 lanes in this direction as well, so it will be 900. Okay, and then you add them, you get 1500 total. So total volume you will have is 1500, and if you want to know the desirable cycle length with this much volume, then it comes out to be negative. Okay, so having 2 lanes in each direction with this much V by C ratio is not a practical solution. We cannot have any practical cycle length with this combination of values. Okay, in the previous example you saw that we were taking each lane in each direction and then looking at the volume of that lane. Okay, so our purpose was not to serve the whole volume which is coming from all direction. Our purpose was to serve the volume which is coming in one lane, because and that lane was basically the lane which has the highest volume. In the previous case we assumed that all lanes have equal volume. Okay, if the volume is divided, it will be divided equally, but practically it is not the case. Volumes are not divided equally, they are divided according to the movement, type of movement you have, and sometimes the placement of the lane. So maybe more people prefer to be in the middle lane as compared to the right lane. Okay, so you will have more volume in the middle lane, but the point is that for each side you don't have to worry about the total volume, you just have to worry about the volume which is coming in the uh, critical lane. Now what is the critical lane? Critical lane is a volume which has more intensive traffic for any movement. Now intensive traffic can mean two things. One is very obvious, the one which has more volume. So it has more volume, that means it is more intensive. So if you provide timing which is enough for that lane, then all the other lanes which are going on simultaneously also by default have enough time for their movement. Intensive movement means, or intensive traffic means something else as well. It means and that is a more correct definition of intensive traffic. That means the lane which requires more time to pass its movement, to pass its number of vehicles. Okay, now in some cases you will have a movement which is for turning. Now turning movements usually take longer time than straight movements. So if you have some slight difference in the volume, let's say the turning volume is slightly less than the other lanes, the lanes which are having other movements, maybe it is slightly less, but in terms of time it will take more time than the other lanes even with less volume. Okay, so a car going straight takes less time to cross the intersection as compared to the car which is taking a left turn. Okay, so in some cases critical lane may be the lane which has less volume, but because it is taking more time to cover the movement. Okay, so intensive movement is basically or intensive traffic is basically traffic which takes more time to move through the intersection. Most of the time it will be the movement which is higher in volume in a higher number of vehicles, but sometimes it can be lower in volume but still be the critical lane because it is carrying a movement which is taking more time. So when you are calculating the time required for each movement, you have the total cycle length and you divide the total cycle length into the time required for critical lane of each site. So in each site you will have a critical lane, find out how much time is required find out how much volume is in that critical lane, okay, and then how much lost time is required for that lane, and then you calculate how much green time should be given for that lane, green and yellow and all these things. Okay, so it all starts with finding out which one is my critical lane and what is the volume in my critical lane, and then everything will be for that lane and for those vehicles which are in that lane. So as I said earlier, once you know the flow of critical lane, the signal timing will be calculated to serve that much flow. Now there are some points which you have to keep in mind, that one critical lane is for one phase and vice versa. So you cannot have multiple critical lanes in one phase, and you cannot have multiple phases for one critical lane. Okay, so each critical lane has one phase and one phase has one critical lane. So there's a one-to-one relationship. Okay, you may have some overlapping, like I said. You do not allow one lane. Actually there are three lanes passing, but when you are calculating the timing, you are calculating for that one lane. Okay, similarly, when one lane is going on, some other lanes or some other phases may also be green, but when you are calculating the timing for that lane, you have calculated it using one phase, one particular phase. uh, Sometimes we have overlapping phases, okay, phases which can happen simultaneously. Okay, for example, a green time for this movement and a green time for this movement can be done simultaneously. These two phases can be simultaneous. Similarly, this left turn and this left turn can be done simultaneously. Okay, so sometimes we have simultaneous phases, or we also call them overlapping phases, okay, to reduce the cycle length. Because if you give a completely different phase without allowing any other phase to move for each movement, then the total cycle length will be higher. Okay, if you allow two movements at a time, you will require less cycle length to cover all the movements. If you require one movement in one phase, or if you require one phase at a time, you will require more time, more cycle length to cover all the phases. So that's why we have overlapping phases. Now, like I have shown you in these two examples, you can have, different possible combinations of cycle length, different possible combinations of overlapping. Okay, so which combination you will go for? The combination which gives you the highest sum of volume in the critical lanes. So let's say the critical lane in this direction has a volume of 200, okay, and the critical lane in this direction has a volume of 300. Similarly, the critical lane for left turning in this direction has a volume of 230, and the critical lane for left turning in this direction has a volume of 260. Okay, so which overlapping should I allow? Should I allow one or two? It will come from the combination of the volume. So if I allow this one, I will have a volume. If I allow number one, I will have a volume of 500. If I allow number two, I will have a volume of 490. So allowing number one overlapping is better as compared to number two, because it has a higher combination of critical lane volumes. So this is how you decide about the overlapping of the phases. Now when you are measuring the performance of the intersections, you have to measure it in a form, or using a parameter which is easier to measure on the intersection. Okay, so if you measure it in terms of flow, for example, like we were doing in the case of freeways and multi and highways, we're using flow and density and these things. If you use these things here, free flow speed and flow and density, then these things do not happen at intersection. At intersections, we do not have free flow speed. Vehicles need to stop. So for the same reason, we do not have continuous flow as well. And you cannot measure density because intersections have very small width. Okay, so you cannot have vehicles per mile. So we use measures of effectiveness which happen at the intersection. Okay, the measures or the parameters which you use to measure the performance of the intersection, we call them measures of effectiveness. So the things which happen normally at the intersection include delay, Every time you come to the intersection, you have some delay. Q, okay, Q is a normal phenomena at intersection, and stopping is also a normal phenomena at the intersection. So delay is normally defined as the time consumed in crossing the intersection, and you take it as the difference between the arrival time and the departure time. So time when you arrived at the intersection. So if you arrived when there was no queue and the signal was green, or you did not need to stop, then the difference between arrival and departure time will be 0. But if there was a queue or you had to stop because of any reason, then there will be some difference between your arrival and departure time, and that will become the delay. Other major effectiveness is Q. Q is a number of vehicles which have to force which are forced to stop behind the stop line because of the red phase of signal. And stop means uh, the number of vehicles which have to stop, or the proportion of vehicles which have to stop. And we use this parameter when we are calculating delay for the intersections in the travel time studies topic. Now delay can be of 4 different types. We have stop time delay, which is the delay when the vehicle was stopped in the queue. We have approach delay. Approach delay means it's a combination of stop time delay and the deceleration rate before the stopping and the acceleration rate after you start moving. Okay, acceleration to your desired speed or to your initial speed. Okay, that is the approach delay. So approach delay starts when you start decelerating because you see a queue or a red signal in front of you, and then it will end when you join the queue and then you start to move, then you accelerate back to your normal speed. All this time will be in the approach delay phase. Then we have time in queue delay, which is the time a vehicle is spending in the queue until it is discharged from the stop line. So this is how it is different from the stop delay. Okay, and stop delay is just when the vehicle is stopped in the queue. But time in queue delay also includes when the car is actually moving or it is still part of the queue. So you come to the intersection, you see a queue, there are already some cars in front of you till you reach the stop line. So that means you have joined the queue. That is your time in queue delay. Now if these cars were moving, you will be moving with them. Okay, so it will not be counted as stop delay, but it will still be counted as time in queue delay until you cross the stop line. Then you have the travel time delay, which is the difference between the actual travel time and the desired travel time. And the desired travel time can be calculated using the free flow speed without any signal, without any obstruction. This particular diagram shows you 3 different types of delay. It cannot show you time in queue delay because queue is something which is dynamic. It keeps on moving back and forth, so it cannot be shown in a static diagram like this. Okay, so on the x-axis you have time, on the y-axis you have distance. So these lines are basically showing you the movement path of the vehicle. So if the vehicle comes and it keeps on moving at the free flow speed or whatever the design speed you have, so it keeps on moving at that speed without any interruption. So you are basically passing or using this line. You are on this line. Okay, so this is your desired path, and if you calculate the time taken by this line, this will be your desired travel time. Okay, the actual path of the vehicle is this. So it is coming at some speed, then it reaches this point. Okay, so this is the point when the car is about to join the queue. Maybe the signal is red, maybe they have vehicles in front of them, in front of the driver. So you see in this much small part the vehicle is actually not stopped, but it is very the speed is very low. Okay, so you see the slope is almost horizontal. Okay, so slope means the speed, distance upon time. So this is a deceleration part, then the vehicle is stopped. Okay, so this is the stop time delay. Okay, this one is the stop time delay, and then when the vehicle starts moving it accelerates, takes some time to accelerate. Okay, so if you calculate the time from the start of deceleration to the end of acceleration, this is the approach delay. Okay, and then it gets back to its own initial speed or whatever possible speed it can have, and keeps on moving. Now if you calculate the difference between the actual path of the vehicle and the path which you made using the free flow speed or the maximum speed, if you take the difference between them, that will give you the travel time delay. At any point, if you take the difference between them, it will give you the travel time delay. Now delay can be measured in as an aggregate term, or it can be measured as an average term. Aggregate delay means the total delay for all vehicles, and average delay means the delay per vehicle. In both the cases, the units are for time, but aggregate delay obviously can be in terms of vehicle seconds, vehicle minutes, or vehicle hours. Okay, so because for all vehicles, and average will be seconds per vehicle. You cannot have hours or minutes per vehicle. Average delay will be how much delay for each vehicle, so it will be seconds per vehicle. Now we have a concept of uniform flow and uniform delay. Okay, and this concept is applied to intersections which are operating below capacity. Okay, so when the intersections are operating below capacity, their delay is uniform, meaning with each increase of vehicle, you will have a constant increase in delay. But when the intersection reaches the capacity, after the capacity, the delay will not increase with a consistent ratio. Okay, there will be more increase with each vehicle added to the flow. So let's say when one vehicle is added to the flow after capacity, increase the delay by 2 seconds. The next vehicle may increase the delay by 4 seconds, and the next one may increase the delay by 5 seconds. So there is no consistent increase and decrease in the delay if the intersection is above capacity. So we have uniform delay condition when the intersection is below capacity. So how to calculate the delay when the intersection is below capacity? We start from this figure which you see on the slide here. So on the x-axis I have time, on the y-axis I have number of vehicles coming to the intersection. So when the, let's say we start when the signal is green. Okay, so this is the green phase here up to here. So vehicles are moving, and so vehicles are coming and they are moving. There's no stoppage for them. At this point, the signal becomes red. So vehicles will keep on coming. So this is the line for vehicles arriving. So this will not stop. Vehicles will not stop arriving. But vehicles who are departing will stop. So you see, we see another line coming from here. This is for vehicles departing. So when the signal is red, there are no vehicles departing, so the line goes horizontal. Then when the signal becomes green again, okay, you see the line starts to move now, starts to go up. Okay, and at some point of time it will again meet the line for vehicles arriving. Okay, the time taken by the departure line to meet the arrival line again, there's a time taken to clear the queue. Okay, and we will call it TC. Okay, so TC is from here to this point. Okay, so this is TC, time taken to clear the queue. Okay, so when the queue is cleared, again the same thing will happen. Vehicles will come and they will move as they are coming. So if you want to find out the waiting time for each vehicle, you can take the difference between the arrival line and the departure line in the horizontal axis. And if you want to find out the length of the queue at any point of time, then you can take the vertical difference between the arrival and the departure line. So if you take horizontal difference, you will get the time, that will be the waiting time. If you take the horizontal difference, it will give you the number of vehicles in the queue. Now there was a scientist whose name was Webster, and he gave an equation to calculate the uniform delay on an intersection. So according to him, uniform delay on an intersection can be calculated as half R into V, where V is the volume, the vehicles in the queue, and R is the length of the red phase, the time for which the signal was red. Okay, and this equation was given to calculate the aggregate delay in seconds. Okay, so total delay for all vehicles in the queue, V. So let us simplify this equation and try to make something which we can use. So starting with the red phase, we said in one phase we have effective green, and the remaining time of the phase is called as the effective red. Okay, so let's say small g is the effective green. So G by C will give you the ratio of the cycle which is effective green, and 1 minus G by C will give you the remaining proportion of the cycle which will be what? Which will be effective red. So cycle length multiplied by the remaining portion of the cycle which is not effective green. Okay, so this is the portion which is effective green. 1 minus this will give you the remaining portion. So this will give you the red phase, the effective red phase for the signal. So we have an equation for R now, which is in terms of cycle length and effective green time. Now let's say the, as I said earlier, the time taken to clear the queue is Tc. Okay, and the vehicles will be moving in time Tc at saturation flow rate. So S into Tc. Okay, so S means the rate at which the vehicles are moving, and Tc is the time in which the vehicles are moving. Okay, so time taken to move all the vehicles which were in the queue is Tc. Okay, and how many vehicles were in the queue? S into Tc. Okay, so S is the rate at which these vehicles are moving, and Tc is the time in which they moved. So if you want to calculate how many vehicles in the queue, S into Tc will give this to you. Okay, so S is the rate of vehicles movement, and Tc is the time in which they move. So S into Tc gives you vehicles in the queue. This should be equal to V, which is the arrival rate of the vehicles, okay, multiplied by the time in which the arriving vehicles had to join the queue. So when the time was red, they had to join the queue. Okay, and the time was when the time was Tc, again they had to join the queue. Okay, because the queue was not cleared, so any vehicle coming to the intersection had to join the queue. Although the queue was moving, but there were some vehicles in front of that car and the stop line. So this also gives you the number of vehicles in the queue. Okay, the rate of vehicles coming multiplied by the time in which they had to join the queue, and this should be equal to S into Tc, because this is the rate of vehicles going multiplied by the time to remove the queue. Okay, so they should be equal, and from this equation I can find out the value of Tc. Okay, so I rearrange this equation to give me the value of Tc. So Tc is given in terms of R, which is the red phase, and S, which is the saturation flow rate, and V, which is the arrival flow rate. So using this equation, so V is the number of vehicles in the queue. Okay, and this is equal to, like I explained to you earlier, V into R plus Tc, arrival rate into the time in which the queue was present, R plus Tc, and we already have the equation for Tc. So you put the equation for Tc here, okay, from the previous slide. So you simplify the equation. So V, capital V, equals to this, and this equation I already have an equation for R as well. Okay, so you put the equation for R here, remove R from here, put its equation. So V, which is the vehicle in the queue, equals to this, where C is the cycle length, G is effective green time, V is the arrival rate, and S is the saturation flow rate. Okay, now this is number of vehicles in the queue. You put it in the Webster's equation, half R into V. So I have an equation for R, which is this one, and this whole thing is the equation for V. So you put both these things in this equation, UD. So half R into V will give you this. So this is the equation for aggregate delay, and if you want to calculate average delay per vehicle, you divide this equation with number of vehicles in the queue. okay, V. So you divide this equation with the equation for V. So you will get uniform delay, uniform average delay, which is this equation. Okay, so in this equation you see cycle length, effective green, and arrival rate and saturation flow rate. So this equation gives you the average uniform delay when the intersection is below capacity. Now in this equation, in the previous equation, we did not have the V by C ratio. Okay, we were using V by C ratio when we were designing the cycle length. So let us try to introduce the V by C ratio in the equation for delay as well, so that my design is connected to the delay. Okay, so I know that this is my V by C ratio. So this is cycle length I will have, and this is the delay I will have. So the capacity of any intersection is given using this equation. We have used it in the previous examples as well, which is what? Saturation flow rate multiplied by the proportion of cycle length, which is effective green, G by C. Okay, how? Because as I said earlier, S is a theoretical quantity which will only happen if the whole cycle was effective green, but S cannot happen. You can only achieve a part of the S. How much part of the S? The part of cycle length which is effective green. So S multiplied by the part of cycle length which is effective green gives you the actual capacity of the intersection. Now from this equation, you take S on one side and everything on the other side. So S equals to capacity upon G by C ratio. Now you take this S from here and you put it in the equation for UD, uniform delay, which I showed you in the previous slide. So in that equation I have replaced the value of S in the denominator. Okay, so S is replaced here. Okay, so this thing which is inside this circular thing is basically the replacement of S. Here it was V by S, so instead of S I put this whole thing here. Okay, so you get this. Now in this in these two ratios you can see V by C here. Okay, and you can see G by C as well. So V by C is represented as X now. So X means V by C, okay, volume capacity ratio, and G by C is as it is here. So now you have the final equation for uniform delay. It has cycle length, it has effective green time, and it has a volume capacity ratio. So let us do an example here. Uh, we have an intersection approach where the approach volume uh, is 1000 vehicles per hour. Now approach volume is what we were calling earlier as the arrival volume, V. Okay, saturation flow rate is given 2800 vehicles per hour. Cycle length is 90 seconds. G by C ratio is 0.55, and we have to calculate average delay per vehicle, UD. Okay, now to calculate average delay, so I have the equation for average delay here. I will use this final form. Okay, so in the final form you see I have G by C, okay, which is given 0.55, and I have cycle length which is given 90 seconds. Okay, but I don't have X. Now X is V by C ratio. Okay, now in V by C ratio I have V, which is the approach volume 1000 vehicles per hour, but I don't have C, capacity. I don't know the capacity of the intersection. So what would I do? I will use this equation which I showed you earlier as well. Capacity equals saturation flow rate into G by C ratio. So I have both things. So my capacity is 1540 vehicles per hour, and then I do V by C because now I have the capacity as well. So volume upon capacity gives you 0.649, and then you put it in the equation for uniform delay. So uniform delay equals to this. So 0.55 is the G by C ratio, 90 seconds the cycle length, and 0.65 is the volume capacity ratio. So every vehicle on this intersection is facing a delay of 14.2 seconds per vehicle. Okay, every vehicle has to face a delay of 14.2 seconds because of the signal.